Bad things happen to good organizations. There's never more important to share your capital S story than when you're dealing with a crisis. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. That organization exists to do this, and they are just like an explorer, a navigator, a champion for their clients. I'm pretty hard on myself. I guess I suffer pretty deeply from the whole imposter syndrome thing. You know what the number one regret is? Not taking enough risks. No matter whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Our guest today is the president and chief storyteller of WordWrite. WordWrite is the Pittsburgh region's largest independent public relations agency and go-to crisis communications firm. So in any given year, his team handles about 12 major crises, 2 that make the news and 10 that do not. Mr. Paul Furiga. I'm so excited. How are you?
I'm great, Mary. I'm excited too. Thank you. You're very kind. That's a wonderful introduction.
One thing that struck me is you like the complex stuff. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, the thornier it is, the better.
So the challenge of storytelling, if it's a simple story, what's the challenge? And in the marketing communications field, if you need a D-list celebrity to show up at an event and a low-cut dress, and here's our new cell phone cover, that's not very challenging. If you need to explain to humanity why your drug that's in trials could save hundreds of thousands of people's lives, that's challenging. Education is required, explanation is required, and there's really, truly deeper purpose to the story, right? And we need cell phone covers. Don't get me wrong. I'm just responding to your question about complex. What is it about complex? I and my entire team get jazzed by the concept of helping very smart people explain the genius of what they're doing to people who are also smart, but nowhere near as smart as they are about what they're working on.
Brilliant. And we are kindred spirits in that regard. I think together we're catalysts. We feel like we're catalysts, like we're duty bound to help folks with their breakthroughs and their innovations. If people don't know about them, then what's the point?
That is so true, because early on, people need to know about them so that they get the funding and the attention that they need. And once they're ready for public consumption, they need the attention, the story to be shared so people can be helped.
So, Paul, what gives you energy and what drains your energy?
What gives me energy is the opportunity to work with folks, almost like solving a puzzle by using creativity to help them unlock the power of what they do. It's just, I don't know what it is. It's in the DNA for me. It's something that I enjoy doing. And over 20 years in journalism, I figured it out one time. I wrote 10,000 stories and edited another 10,000. A lot of beginnings, middles, and ends. You really learn, Mary, what it takes to move hearts and minds and create action. So when I'm with people, it's just, I know how to help them share this in a way that's better and get them what they would like, right? And that's what gives me energy. What drains energy for me is when people just want to talk about what they do and there's no enthusiasm and every word has 14 syllables. And if you don't understand what I'm saying when I'm talking about it like this, then you're just dumb. Yeah, that more than draining my energy, that sort of makes me angry.
It's almost like a pet peeve. It sounds like a pet peeve. Yeah, for
It's
sure.
a pet peeve too, but it also drains my energy because it's extremely difficult sometimes to work with folks who, it's not that they don't understand the importance of sharing their story, it's that they have an anti-story mentality that says people should find them at the top of the mountain, and it's not their business to help people find them.
What do you love the most about your work? And what do you like the least?
What I love the most is the opportunity to apply everything that I and our team have learned over the years about the power of different kinds of stories. And there are many kinds of stories that can be shared, and how to simplify them to create a direct path to deliver results. I think the flip side of that, to answer the second question. The thing that I like least is having to spend time doing all the other things you need to do in a business in order to make it possible to focus on the core competency of the work, right? We have a lease, we have financial and HR considerations. Those are important. As the CEO of the company, I have to have some vision into that, and I have to attend to that in some ways. I just don't enjoy that as much as the storytelling.
Yes, which is a great segue into this next question. When did you realize that you knew what the great work of your life would be?
Wow. I was in junior high, which of course everybody calls middle school these days. And I was invited to work on the school newspaper. And I had so much fun doing that. And one day, one of my teachers in one of my classes just started reading something that I had written to the entire class. And he didn't say, "This is something that Paul wrote," and Paul's sitting right there. He said, I read this in the student newspaper today, and I thought that this was just really well done. And I thought to myself, wow, somebody outside my own cranium thinks that I might actually be able to do this. And from that early validation, one thing led to another.
It's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Along the way, just curious because you have seen and dealt with some stuff, some serious stuff, and some interesting crises, and then the unspeakables where there's loss of souls, loss of life. Do you ever have doubts or freak out moments about the great work of your life? And can you give us an example, perhaps?
So you mentioned that we do a lot of crisis work. And one of the things we've learned is there's never more important to share your capital S story than when you're dealing with a crisis. Bad things happen to good organizations, just like bad things happen to good people. The book has been famous for decades, right? And to a certain extent, much like a defense attorney representing somebody caught red-handed right after the murder, I'm sure that those folks deserve, air quotes, to have their story shared, right? But those have been the moments, and I cannot sit here and tell you that we've ever worked with somebody who fits that description. However, we've been asked, and that's tough because you know what needs to be done and you know you can do it, but you are essentially asked to make some level of a moral judgment about whether you're going to work for that kind of a person or an organization.
Yeah, and you have to apply your core principles of professionalism and ethics to make that really tough call. Yeah, makes sense. I'm sure you've been asked this before by many other folks like me who consider you to be a mentor. How do you define success?
I think early on when I was younger, all the external measures of success seemed to be important. And certainly our society, even today, social media, Instagram, TikTok, glorify the external measures of success. To me, I define success by the measure of being contented and, when it's possible, happy with my relationships, number one, and what I've been able to do in contributing to the greater good. It's possible, and not only is it possible, it's common for people to have lots of stuff and be very unhappy. And I'm not focused on this stuff. It doesn't matter. And maybe part of that is the longer that I'm around and the more friends, family I see go through challenges, some of them pass away, the more I recalibrate what's really important in terms of success. And having people with you, friends and family, who you can be honest and real with is far more important to me than getting a front page headline in the Wall Street Journal. Although there are times when our clients should have a page one headline in the Wall Street Journal. We work to get that, but that doesn't matter so much for me.
So if you had to do it all over again, would you do anything differently? What would that look like?
One of the things that's really important to me personally, and also at our company, we have 5 core values. One of them is being intellectually curious. And certainly as a journalist, to be a good journalist, you have to be intellectually curious. It's just who I am. So I read a lot and I follow a lot of people that I respect. One of them is the author Daniel Pink, who's written a number of great books. One of my favorites, not his most recent book, but a favorite, is to sell as human, in which he talks a lot about ambiverts. And I'm an ambivert. I'm not an introvert. I'm not an extrovert. And so when people would always make those comparisons, I had a hard time placing myself. I'm more in the middle. I can be extroverted when I need to, but I also appreciate my downtime. Anyway, Pink recently did something he called the World Regret Survey. For your audience, just get on old Mr. Google and look up the World Regret Survey. He made, I don't know how much he paid to do this, but it's public and you can look at it. And you know what the number one regret is, Mary? Not taking enough risks. I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. So I don't look at that and say to myself, that was really dumb and my whole life has been ruined. But I do sometimes say to myself, I wonder, because I do love what I'm doing, if I would have started doing this a little bit sooner, what would have that been like? If I would have said yes to this or that, what would that have been like?
Again, thank you. There's folks listening right now, I'm sure could absolutely relate to that, including yours truly.
Yeah, the
So thank
opportunity
you.
to say yes more often than no, right? Or maybe later. I think the biggest impediment to an individual's success is themselves.
For
I
sure.
think it was Henry Ford who said, no matter whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
I think I know the answer to this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. It's about your superpower, and it's asked in a very deliberate way. Where have you spent 10,000 hours honing your superpower?
There's actually a few places. One of them certainly is writing and storytelling, of course. And that is something that still gives me a lot of pleasure. Actually, I just started a stand-up comedy class. And when my assignment this week is to write 5 monologue jokes. And that's just, I love that stuff. So I've spent a lot of time on that. And as you can see, I'm spending more. But another one is music. I love music. I play in a band. I played in 4 bands over the last 15 years, 16 years. And yeah, those are things that just the creative spark really gets going for me. And I love that stuff.
So it makes sense. You're on the board of River City Brass, yes?
I was a classically trained tuba player. I played all the way through high school. I studied with a fellow at the University of Akron who played in the Cleveland Symphony. Now, most symphonies only have one tuba. He was the second tuba when they needed one. But still, I thought that's what I would do with my life. And my parents told me that they wouldn't support that career choice. I love my parents, but that's what they told me. And so I fixed it. I went out and got into that extremely lucrative field of journalism instead.
And you answered my question. So the tuba is your love.
The tuba, I play bass in a band called the Altered Egos, and we're really having a lot of fun with that. And we're going to play about 35 times this year.
Well, is there anything you wish you were better at?
I'm pretty hard on myself. I guess I suffer pretty deeply from the whole imposter syndrome thing. And sometimes, Mary, it takes having somebody as erudite and accomplished and enthusiastic as you to read my own bio to be like, I didn't do so bad so far. And I think a lot of people suffer from this, especially, it's been my experience that high achievers, a large percentage of high achievers suffer from the imposter syndrome. One of the reasons they're high achievers is because wherever they are, that's not good enough. I have to do more. And so they achieve more, right? Stopping and smelling the roses, that's something that I could probably do a little bit better with.
Yeah, it's great advice. And off sidebar, I can look you directly in the eye and I can say without a shadow of the doubt, every single one of my clients, these are highly accomplished individuals from an executive personal branding standpoint, highly accomplished like you, well, C-suite, founders of extraordinary companies, physicians, the apogee of their careers, 100% from some level of imposter syndrome. It's mind-blowing.
Amazing how common it is.
So this next question comes from Oprah. What do you know about yourself to be absolutely true?
That my desire is to be one among many and help others succeed. That's always been my focus, sometimes to my detriment or what other people would say is my detriment. I've been in business situations with partners and people from other organizations, and we'll go into a meeting and I'll share something. We'll get out of the meeting and they'll say, why did you do that? You didn't have to do that because it was the right thing to do, but they didn't pay you to do that. Okay, that's okay. It was the right thing to do, it was the right thing to share.
Yeah, said thank you. There's a plaque hanging on my wall. It was given to me by my mentor when I became a CEO of a healthcare tech company. It's a picture of a redwood tree.
Uh-huh.
And across the redwood tree, it says, integrity is one of many paths, but it's the right path. And it's the one upon you'll never get lost.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting you mentioned that, because when LinkedIn first became a thing, I joined, and pretty soon after they said, hey, there's this thing you can do on LinkedIn. It's called recommendations. Press this button here and send it to your connections and they'll do recommendations for you. And it was amazing to me how many came back and mentioned integrity with regard to me. And I share that only because it's appropriate to the quote you just shared. And I thought to myself, wow, that's very interesting that so many people unaided, sitting at their own laptops or desktops, miles and miles from each other, typed in the same word.
And it speaks volumes about your personal brand. And it underscores, I hope you don't mind, that Renaissance Hall of Fame award really stood out for me of all of the awards. There are a lot of them, but that one really stood out. And I am making the assumption that's probably why. That's one of the key factors. Yes.
That was a really fun night. Actually, that was 10 years ago now that I won that award. It is a career pinnacle. I don't like to think that my career is over, and that was the last big thing. My book came out after that, some other things. So we're still climbing the mountain. But anyway, what was fun about that was to be able to have a lot of my mentors and friends in the room for that. And that was really awesome. I really do believe that none of us gets where we are as simply an individual achievement, that there are people who see things in us before we can see them in ourselves. There are people who teach us things that make us better at what we do. There are people who make it possible for us to unlock our revealing genius, to use a phrase I might have heard somewhere. And it was fun the night that I got that award to have all those people in the room to say thank you.
That's great. I have 3 more questions and then we'll do a bonus question if I may.
Absolutely.
So I'm dying to hear the answer to this one. What would people be surprised to know about you?
They would probably be surprised to know that I really did want to be a musician. It's a little bit different. I paused because, again, this band I'm in now, we're playing so much and I'm having so much fun with it that it's more out there. But the flavor of marketing and PR that we do, it's creative, but it's very business serious, right? Healthcare, as an example, it's life and death stuff a lot of times, right? So you wouldn't expect necessarily the gear shift from mortality and morbidity and life-threatening illnesses to, hey, let's play some rock and roll. Do you like Def Leppard or Metallica, or do you want to hear Adele or something else, right? And in fact, I just, my Facebook profile, the day we're recording, I put up a band picture instead of a professional picture as my profile picture. And it's been stunning how many comments I've gotten about that, including some people saying, oh, I didn't know you were in a band.
No kidding. Interesting.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me though. It almost, it's like rocket fuel for your creative side, for your writing side, because it uses a part of your brain that you don't use when you're writing. So it's almost like one fuels the other. It feeds the feeder, perhaps.
I agree. And for me personally, in that regard, we're talking about 2 creative endeavors. So some folks in the audience might be like, if you're creative, it doesn't matter whether you're writing or painting or music or whatever. You're right, though, Mary. It does use different aspects of the brain. And this is one of the ways for me, and I'm sure for many people in the audience, they have their own ways of doing this, of getting outside what I do on a day-to-day basis and stretching the brain and doing things that I don't normally do. The last 3 bands I've been in, completely different scenarios. So the Altered Egos, I've been in that band for a year and a half. Before that, I was in a band called Lindsay Neal and Kickback, and it was a country band. And the way I got into that band is through mutual musician friends. One of my guitar player friends said, hey, do you like country music? And I said, I've never played country music. It's not my favorite genre. And he said, friends of mine have a country band and their bass player just died of a heart attack suddenly. And that's a gut hit right there. But he said to me, they need a bass player and they need somebody fast. Can I give them your name? And he did. And so I had to learn 60 songs from a genre of music that I didn't really follow, like within 3 weeks. And the deal was, you play one gig and we'll see how it goes. And I wound up playing with that band for 18 months.
No kidding. That is what a great story.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was really a lot of fun. And again, it's like a willingness to be open-minded, right? It's okay. I've never done that before. I could have said no. Could have said I've never played that kind of music and I don't want to. But I looked at it as a good challenge, a way to stretch.
We haven't even talked about deadlines. It's part of your DNA.
It is. And a lot of people who get into journalism, they fall into this deadline-driven psychosis, right? And when you think about procrastinators, that's a special issue. When you're in the news business, there's always another deadline. Even if you're a procrastinator, you can't be one. It's because there's this heart-stopping adrenaline that propels you forward over and over again. And the psychosis part of it is a lot of people I knew in journalism, it's like riding the roller coaster. And when they get off, they can't have a normal life. I think sometimes, sadly, this is what happens to a lot of our veterans. They live in that heightened state of anxiety and alertness that comes from being in combat or something like that, or first responders. And then you're in a different environment. It's a little bit hard to shift gears.
What's a book that inspired you to behave or think differently?
There's two. One is Abundance. And I just blanked on the fellow who wrote the book, but he's very well-known author, started the X Prize. And the basic premise of the book, it really needs to be updated. It's nonfiction, is that despite what we read and we see, we hear, we experience, life is actually in the aggregate getting better for us around the world. And Abundance, Peter Diamandis is the author, Diamandis. It's a great book. Another one, more recent, by a very prolific author, the most popular professor at the Wharton School, is Think Again by Adam Grant.
Oh, yes, that is a good one.
It's a great book. And Adam Grant is really a very interesting thinker. And his entire focus is on shaking the conventional wisdom, the one that's inside our skulls and the ones that propel society as well.
What is your favorite quote, Paul, or your motto, and why is that?
Okay, so in our work with stories, there are three main taproots for what we do. One is the mythologist Joseph Campbell and his work in developing the monomyth, or what most people know as the hero's journey. If you've ever been exposed to Star Wars, with the trajectory through the films of Luke Skywalker is the hero's journey. And literally George Lucas, when he decided to do the films, and by the way, he intended to do 9 films from the beginning, he sat down with Joseph Campbell and said, how do I take the hero's journey and create this space odyssey? So that's one taproot for us, because in helping our clients uncover, develop, and share their own great story, we're looking for archetypal stories. So the second taproot is Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst. Now, during World War I, Jung was practicing in Switzerland, and during World War I, as in World War II, Switzerland was a neutral country. What that meant was people fled the fighting by going to Switzerland. And what Jung learned after a while was that regardless of education, economic attainment, language, where they came from, people were coming to him and they were telling the same stories. It led him to develop this concept he calls the collective unconscious. Humans are hardwired to have certain stories. So for instance, if we bumped into each other in person and you said to me, hey, I hear you got a new client, or I said to you, hey, I hear you got a new client, I could tell you all kinds of things about the client. But if I said this, it's a David and Goliath story, you would know immediately, without being a biblical scholar, what story that is. That's the underdog in whatever industry or business or whatever, taking on the giants. That is an example of an archetypal story. I know this is a long way of getting the answer to your question, but I wanted to give you the context. So our third taproot is Simon Sinek. I love Simon Sinek. He's written 3 great books. The most recent one is called The Infinite Game. Highly recommend it. Came out about 2 years ago. He also wrote Leaders Eat Last, which is a wonderful book as well. A study in the Marine Corps, in which literally the officers let the men and women being shot at eat first, which is emblematic of the way that they desire to run the Marine Corps. His first book, though, is called Start With Why. And that's the quote. 2009, early TEDx talks, back when they weren't as professional as the main TED Talks. There's hundreds of TEDx organizers around the world today who do TEDx's. He did one in Puget Sound, and it led to him writing the book Start With Why. And the quote from that is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And frequently when I'm speaking to business groups, if I speak in Vistage, the CEO organization, we'll go around the room and everybody will introduce themselves. Hi, I'm first name, last name, boring title from boring company. We do boring thing. Big freaking deal. Now, I ask those people sometimes at the end, what would be different if instead of introducing yourself and just saying what your title is, where you work, and what that company does, you explain to people why you do what you do? What is your passion? And Mary, that's our focus at our company, is helping companies, organizations uncover and put that into the format of their capital S story so that people know right away without having to read bullets on a slide or paging through a brochure or scrolling through a boring website. Hey, that organization exists to do this. And they are just like an explorer, a navigator, a champion for their clients, whatever it may be.
Why they exist to serve is the takeaway. Yes. This has been absolutely amazing. I could talk for hours with you, Paul, honestly.
Thank you. I want to, first of all, thank you for having me on. I want to thank your audience for being here with us. And I invite anybody who would be interested in having a further conversation to reach out to me. I did write this book, Finding Your Capital S Story. There's more than 50,000 words in there. And over the years, I and my team have created millions and millions of words of content and thinking around this. We can't possibly dig into everything that I might be able to share with somebody who's struggling with this in a one-on-one conversation. So I'd be happy to have that kind of conversation with anyone in your audience if they're interested in digging into it a little bit deeper.
And I can endorse the book. It's a keeper. I think everyone should have it on their bookshelf, because I've gone back to it again and again just to read the stories, like you mentioned, that have the art. They're just so rich and inspirational and satisfying. So I highly recommend.
Thank you.
If a higher power would let you do, be, have, see, or anything, it's like a fill in the blank question. If a higher power would let you, Paul, what would you do? I would, and then fill in that blank.
I would reconnect all of humanity with the creativity that lies within. One of my other pet peeves is that some people say they're not creative, and I don't believe that. I believe that if all of us were in touch with our creativity, that this world would be a much better place. Creation, the root of the word, is all about making something, adding, not subtracting, right? And it has within it the spirit of giving and adding to society, the world at large. And I just, when you're around young children, they have no reservations about sharing their creativity and trying and doing things that 4 or 5 years later, unfortunately, for whatever reason, are beaten out of them by growing up. And I firmly believe that still resides within all of us. Reconnecting with that creativity is one of the most important things that we as human beings can do to enhance our lives personally and the lives of those around us.
Paul, thank you for sharing your time with us today. We are so grateful.
It's been an honor to be with you and your audience.